The glass walls of the HR conference room reflected the pale morning light, casting sharp patterns across the table. I sat at one end, calm, composed, while across from me, the HR manager and my direct supervisor exchanged that rehearsed corporate expression. Sympathetic eyes, tight lips, and a voice carefully tuned to sound regretful. "Miranda," the HR manager began, sliding a crisp folder across the table. "We've discovered your second job." For a moment, I didn't move. My pulse didn't even quicken. I'd known this was coming, just not this soon. "Our internal compliance team found external employment records," she continued, voice steady but cold. "It's a clear violation of your contract. You've been working elsewhere while employed here." Beside her, my manager, Eric, crossed his arms and leaned back, pretending to look disappointed. "You know we have a zero-tolerance policy for this sort of thing." I nodded once, silently. "We'll need your signature here," HR said, pushing the termination letter toward me. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." I took the pen without hesitation. The silence stretched between us, heavy and expectant. They wanted me to fight back, to protest, to beg, to explain. But instead, I smiled, signed my name in calm, deliberate strokes, and placed the pen back on the table. Then I looked up at them and said, "Good. Then I can finally focus on one." Eric's brow furrowed. HR blinked. They didn't understand. Not yet. "What do you mean by that?" HR asked, her tone slipping from professional to cautious curiosity. "Exactly what I said," I replied. "One job." I stood, smoothed my blazer, and pushed the folder back across the table. "Thank you for the opportunity." They watched me walk out, expecting a meltdown, maybe even tears. Instead, I gave them a polite nod, as if I'd just finished a routine meeting. They had no idea what my second job really was. As the security guard escorted me to my desk, my colleagues whispered behind their monitors. No one asked questions out loud, but I could feel the weight of their stares. In the sterile world of corporate finance, gossip traveled faster than data. "Did you hear?" HR caught her moonlighting. Someone murmured, "Can you believe it?" She seemed so dedicated I ignored them all, packing my few personal belongings into a small box. My favorite ceramic mug, a notebook filled with sketches of process maps, a framed photo of my mother. The guard didn't say a word as he walked me through the lobby. He just pressed the elevator button and stared ahead. When the doors opened to the bright morning outside, the spring air felt cleaner than it had in years. I took a deep breath. Freedom. Not the kind they thought they were giving me, but the kind I'd been waiting for. 2 years ago, when I joined Harmon and Vexler Financial, I believed I'd finally made it. Stable salary, corner office, a future that looked promising. I worked late nights, fixed others' mistakes, trained new hires. When the firm's client database nearly crashed, I stayed up for 48 hours to save it. The partners thanked me publicly at the next staff meeting. "Miranda's dedication is unmatched," they said. 2 weeks later, Eric, my manager, took the credit in front of a client and earned himself a promotion. That was the first time I understood how things really worked there. I stayed silent, smiled, and kept working. But quietly, I started preparing. My second job wasn't with another employer. It wasn't moonlighting at all. It was the business I'd been building from my own designs. Software that streamlined financial auditing, the very system Harmon and Vexler depended on but refused to modernize. When I'd pitched the idea to them 18 months ago, they'd laughed. "It's too ambitious," Eric said. "Stick to your job description." So I did, at least on paper. In reality, my evenings became something else entirely. I spent countless nights coding, testing, improving until my software was functional enough to quietly license to small firms. By the time HR called me in, 10 of those firms were already using it under a different name, LumaTrack Systems. My second job was the company that was about to change my entire life. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A single text lit up the screen. From Daniel, LumaTrack co-founder. "Client demo confirmed. 2 p.m. sharp. I typed back, "I'll be there. Just got free earlier than expected." For a long moment, I just sat there, watching the Harmon and Vexler tower through the windshield. Behind those glass walls, they probably thought they'd rid themselves of a liability. They had no idea what was coming, because in exactly 2 days, their biggest client would be sitting across the table from me, at my demo, under my new company's banner. And when that meeting was over, Harmon and Vexler would realize just how expensive their mistake had been. The rain began that afternoon, fine needles against my windshield as I pulled out of Harmon and Vexler's parking lot for the last time. I didn't look back. There was no reason to. Everything that had defined my professional life for the past 4 years was behind those mirrored windows. Stress, underappreciation, and the illusion of security. I drove straight to the co-working space downtown, the one where I'd spent my nights and weekends over the past year. The walls were plastered with startup posters and motivational quotes, but to me, it had always felt more like a lifeboat than an office. Daniel was already there, sitting at our usual corner desk, laptop open, coffee cup steaming beside him. He looked up as I walked in. "You're early," he said, then paused when he saw my face. "Wait, did it happen?" I set the cardboard box of my belongings down beside the desk. "They found out," I said simply. He grinned, half shocked, half exhilarated. "So that's it? You're free?" I let out a small laugh. Free, unemployed, and slightly terrified. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms. "Miranda, you've been doing their job and ours for a year. You've built something that's already earning revenue. You're not unemployed. You just switched companies." His optimism had always balanced my realism. Daniel was a systems analyst I'd met years ago at a finance tech seminar. He'd left corporate life early after watching his department dissolve during a merger. When I told him about the inefficiencies at Harmon and Vexler, he'd said, "Then build something better. I'll help." That was how LumaTrack Systems was born. 2 people with laptops, too much caffeine, and a shared frustration with bureaucracy. It started as a side project, almost therapy. I was drowning in spreadsheets, manual reconciliations, and outdated systems at work. Our auditing software was so archaic that every client report required hours of redundant verification. When I proposed automation, management dismissed it as unnecessary complexity. But I knew better. I saw how much time was being wasted, how errors were creeping in. So I began coding after hours, testing automation scripts on anonymized data. Slowly, what began as a few simple macros evolved into a full-fledged auditing intelligence platform. Daniel joined in on weekends, building the user interface and client dashboard. We worked quietly, cautiously, never from company resources, never during paid hours. We kept everything clean, legally, ethically, perfectly separate. By the time we registered LumaTrack officially, it wasn't just an idea. It was a product. Our early clients were small accounting firms, frustrated with the same inefficiencies I'd been fighting. They didn't have big budgets, but they had faith. And when the system caught its first major discrepancy, a missing $300,000 transaction error in one client's records, it paid for itself overnight. Within months, word spread. 10 firms signed up. Revenue trickled in, modest but steady. Daniel handled contracts, I handled technology. We worked quietly, intentionally invisible. Then last week, everything changed. One of Harmon and Vexler's biggest clients, Borealis Capital, reached out to LumaTrack for a demonstration. They'd heard of us through a smaller partner firm and wanted to see how our system handled real-time auditing. Daniel's email had been almost disbelieving. "They don't know it's you, right?" Of course they didn't. I had presented myself as M. Lane in all external communications. Professional, efficient, anonymous. But the moment they confirmed the meeting, I'd known exposure was inevitable. Still, I didn't care. If Harmon and Vexler wanted to fire me, they'd just freed me to walk into that meeting without a single ethical restraint. Now, sitting in our small shared office, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the presentation. The system interface glowed softly, a design I'd built line by line, every piece of logic refined through years of frustration. Daniel glanced over my shoulder. You sure about this? I nodded. Borealis deserves better. We gave them better. If Harmon and Vexler couldn't value that, it's not my problem anymore. He hesitated, then smiled. Then let's make tomorrow count. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of the surreal stillness that comes after years of tension. My mind kept replaying scenes. Eric taking credit for my work, HR's careful condescension, the smug look on Finn's face when I trained him only for him to be promoted over me. I thought of the irony. They'd accused me of betraying the company, when all I'd done was build something that could have saved it. Around 3 a.m., I got up, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered through the rain. Somewhere out there, Harmon and Vexler's servers were grinding through month-end reports using outdated systems I had begged them to replace. Meanwhile, my software, my second job, was ready to automate it all with precision they couldn't dream of. At 8:30 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Daniel. Demo confirmed for 2 p.m. Borealis bringing their CFO. I smiled, a slow, quiet satisfaction spreading through me. By noon, I'd changed into a dark blue suit, the same one I used to wear to board meetings. This time, though, it wasn't for someone else's company. When I arrived at the co-working office, Daniel was setting up the presentation. Nervous? He asked. Only a little, I said, plugging in my laptop. It's funny. They thought they caught me cheating the system. He looked up. And? I met his eyes. They never realized I was building a better one. At exactly 2 p.m., Borealis Capital's CFO walked in. She shook my hand firmly, unaware she was meeting the person Harmon and Vexler had just fired. As I began the demo, explaining how Lumitrak's architecture could reduce their audit time by 70%, I felt the weight of years lifting. Every line of code, every dismissed idea, every ignored suggestion, it all led here. And when the CFO leaned forward, eyes widening at the live analytics dashboard, I knew. 2 days from now, when she made her decision, Harmon and Vexler's biggest client wouldn't be theirs anymore. It would be mine. The conference room at the co-working space smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Our logo, Lumitrak Systems, flickered on the wall-mounted screen, simple and professional. Daniel adjusted the projector one last time while I checked the presentation slides on my laptop. Everything was ready. When Borealis Capital's team entered, their energy filled the room instantly. Sharp suits, crisp handshakes, a mix of curiosity and fatigue. They'd spent months fighting through Harmon and Vexler's outdated systems, and it showed. Thank you for meeting us on short notice, said the CFO, a composed woman in her 40s named Margaret Price. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to having every answer. We've heard about your software from 2 of our partner firms. They claim it's changed their workflow entirely. I smiled. We like to think we make complexity simple. She nodded, taking a seat. Then let's see what you've built. I clicked to the first slide. On the screen, datasets appeared. Columns of anonymized financial entries that shifted as the system ran. Lumitrak automates the reconciliation process by identifying irregularities in real time, I began. Where traditional audits depend on manual cross-referencing, our AI-assisted model identifies anomalies across multiple ledgers simultaneously. Margaret leaned forward slightly. And this works with existing infrastructures? Yes, I said. That's what makes it different. We designed it to integrate with legacy systems instead of replacing them. Daniel chimed in. Implementation usually takes less than 48 hours. You won't have to rebuild your data architecture. Her eyebrows lifted. 48 hours? I nodded. We've done it 10 times already. The demo continued for nearly an hour. I walked them through every function. The live error tracking, instant verification dashboard, automated audit trail. Each question from Borealis's team was met with evidence, data, and examples. And with each answer, their skepticism softened into interest. Then I clicked to the final slide. Here's a live simulation, I said, opening a secure demo environment. Let's run your sample data. Margaret handed me a flash drive. This includes anonymized files from our last quarter's records. Show us what you can do. I inserted the drive, loaded the data, and pressed run. For 30 seconds, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the laptop. Then the dashboard populated, highlighting discrepancies across multiple divisions. A red flag appeared beside an entry marked Asset Transfer Division 3. Margaret frowned. Wait, that's not supposed to be there. I clicked on the flagged item. This transfer was logged twice. Once as an internal reallocation, once as a new asset acquisition. The system recognized it as a potential duplication worth $1.4 million. Her jaw tightened. We missed that in our manual audit. It's easy to miss, I said gently. Your previous system doesn't cross-verify subledgers. Luma tracked as she exchanged a look with her deputy. The atmosphere shifted. The cautious curiosity now replaced by alert, impressed focus. When the simulation ended, Margaret turned to her team. This is cleaner than anything we've seen in months. I felt Daniel's glance, but I kept my composure. That's what we aim for, I said. After a few more questions, the meeting wrapped up. Margaret stood, shaking my hand again. I'd like a full proposal on my desk by tomorrow morning, she said. Our board meets Friday. If your numbers make sense, we'll make a decision then. Of course, I said. We'll have it ready. As they left, Daniel let out a low whistle. Did you see her face when the flag came up? Hard to miss, I said, closing my laptop. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. They're going to drop Harmon and Vexler, aren't they? I looked out the window, where the rain had finally stopped and sunlight hit the pavement like liquid gold. If I were them, I said softly, I would. That night, we worked until nearly midnight drafting the proposal. Daniel handled the pricing structure while I wrote the technical integration plan. Every sentence felt like drawing a line between two lives, the one that had ended and the one just beginning. At one point, Daniel looked up from his laptop. You know, when you said you had a second job, this isn't what I imagined. I smiled. Neither did they. Do you ever feel guilty? He asked quietly. About leaving them behind? I paused. I tried to fix things there for years. I sent reports, built prototypes, made presentations. They ignored every one of them. If they're struggling now, it's because they chose not to listen. He nodded. Then this is justice. Not justice, I corrected. Balance. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city was quiet, washed clean from the night's rain. I brewed coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the final draft. Every figure, every explanation, every sentence mattered. At 8:47 a.m., I clicked send. The proposal to Borealis Capital was gone. My old employer's largest account was now one decision away from leaving them for me. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Years of exhaustion and humiliation condensed into one sharp, exhilarating moment of peace. At noon, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. From Margaret Price. I opened it immediately. Thank you for the presentation, Miranda. The board was impressed. We're evaluating terms and will reach a decision within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. I reread the message twice before setting my phone down. 2 days from now, the same people who had called me a liability would realize the truth. My second job wasn't competition. It was evolution, and they'd fired the very person who could have led them into the future. I thought of Eric, sitting in his office, probably bragging about how he'd handled the Miranda situation. I imagined his face when Borealis called to terminate their contract. The irony would be perfect. I smiled, finished my coffee, and whispered to the empty apartment. Tick-tock. The countdown had begun. The next 2 days moved in slow motion, like the quiet before a storm. Every hour felt heavier than the one before. The email from Borealis sat pinned at the top of my inbox, and though I told myself to stay calm, I couldn't stop checking for updates. By Wednesday morning, 24 hours had passed since the demo. Daniel and I were back at the co-working space, laptops open, pretending to focus on smaller client requests. But we both knew our attention was elsewhere. At 9:10 a.m., Daniel broke the silence. "You think they've already decided?" I looked up from my screen. "If they have, we'll hear soon. The board meets this afternoon." He nodded but kept tapping his pen. "You realize if Borealis signs, everything changes. We'll need staff, infrastructure, full-time support." "I know," I said. "It's strange. For years, I fought to prove my worth to people who never cared. Now I might have to prove it to myself." He smiled faintly. "You already did." By lunchtime, my nerves were thin. I went for a walk downtown, letting the early spring air clear my head. The city felt alive. People in suits rushing to lunch meetings, students laughing by cafe windows, construction sounds echoing between buildings. For the first time in months, I wasn't running late or under pressure. I was simply waiting for a decision that could rewrite my life. When I returned to the office, Daniel was standing by the window, phone in hand, face unreadable. "Who is that?" I asked. He turned slowly, eyes wide. "Borealis. They called me directly." My stomach tightened. "And?" He grinned. "They're in. Full contract. They're moving their entire auditing division to Lumatrack. Effective immediately." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air, echoing between us. Then a wave of relief hit me so strongly I had to sit down. "They really signed?" "They did more than that," Daniel said, excitement breaking through. "They want a long-term partnership. 2-year renewable agreement, and they want you to lead the transition personally." I laughed, half from shock, half from disbelief. "They don't even realize what this means for Harmon and Vexler." "Oh, they'll find out," Daniel said, leaning against the desk. "Losing Borealis will cost them millions, maybe more." The irony felt surreal. Fired for having a second job, and now that job had just dismantled the company that fired me. That evening, I went home and sat in silence for a long time. The city lights glowed outside my window, but my thoughts were far away. Back in that glass conference room, watching Eric's smug expression as he handed me the termination letter. I'd spent 4 years giving everything to a company that treated me like a replaceable part. They'd taken my loyalty for granted, my work for credit, my silence for submission. But they'd never once tried to understand what I was capable of. Now they would. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miranda?" The voice stopped me cold. "Eric, how did you get this number?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Doesn't matter," he said quickly. His voice was strained, the polished arrogance replaced by something else. Panic. "I need to ask, did you take Borealis?" I didn't answer immediately. "Take?" I repeated. "They made a business decision." "You don't understand," he said, his words tumbling over each other. "Borealis was 30% of our revenue. They've terminated their contract. The partners are furious. They think you—" "I what?" I said calmly. "That you planned this. That you used your position to poach them." I almost laughed. "Eric, you fired me for having a second job, remember?" "I didn't take anything from you. You gave it away." He was silent. I could hear muffled voices in the background, the sound of chaos. Exactly the kind of chaos he used to delegate to me to clean up. "I tried to warn them," he said finally, "about cutting corners, about how much we relied on your work. But they didn't listen." I leaned back in my chair. "You mean the same way they didn't listen to me?" He didn't answer. "Good luck, Eric," I said softly. "Maybe now they'll finally see what happens when you underestimate the people who hold everything together." And then I hung up. The next morning, my phone lit up again, this time with headlines. "Harmon and Vexler faces client exodus after major contract loss." Borealis Capital moves to innovative auditing startup. Underneath the article, a single photo, the familiar glass building I'd walked out of just 2 days ago. I stared at it for a long moment, emotions twisting between satisfaction and sadness. I hadn't wanted destruction. I'd only wanted recognition. But sometimes those two things arrive hand in hand. At noon, Daniel called. "Our inbox is exploding," he said. 3 new inquiries from firms asking for demos. Apparently word travels fast. I smiled, unable to stop the rush of warmth in my chest. It's only the beginning. Still, part of me couldn't help but wonder what was happening inside that building right now. The same people who dismissed me, whispering about my betrayal, were probably scrambling to recover. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was balance. The same balance I'd mentioned to Daniel before. They had taken too much from too many for too long. Now the scales were simply leveling themselves. I looked out at the skyline, the afternoon sun reflecting off 1,000 windows, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But I knew the story wasn't over yet. Because when you build something powerful enough to change an industry, people notice. And sometimes the ones who notice first are the ones who want it back. By Friday morning, the air in the co-working space buzzed with quiet disbelief. Overnight, 3 more companies had reached out for demos, each citing the same phrase. "We heard what happened with Borealis." Daniel walked in holding 2 coffees and a newspaper folded under his arm. "Front page," he said, dropping it onto my desk. The headline read, "Former employee startup overtakes her previous firm in landmark deal." Below it, a photo of me from the Borealis demo, standing by the presentation screen, smiling slightly, unaware someone had captured the moment. My old employer's logo blurred faintly in the reflection behind me. I stared at it for a long time. "That's surreal," I murmured. "You earned it," Daniel said. "They underestimated you, and now the world knows it." Still, I felt a strange mix of pride and melancholy. Vindication rarely arrives without a hint of loss. I hadn't built Lumitrack to destroy anyone. I'd built it because I believed in something better. Harmon and Vexler had just refused to see it. By noon, our inbox overflowed with partnership requests. One email caught my eye. Subject line, "Meeting request from Harmon and Vexler Executive Office." For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I opened it. "Miranda, this is Robert Lang, Managing Partner. I'd appreciate the chance to speak with you privately regarding possible collaboration. Please let me know your availability this afternoon." Collaboration. The word almost made me laugh. Daniel glanced over my shoulder. "You're not seriously considering meeting them, are you?" "I don't know," I said quietly. "Maybe I need to hear what they have to say." At 3 p.m., I walked into a downtown cafe halfway between our office and theirs. Robert was already seated in the corner booth, immaculate as ever in his tailored suit, but his posture was off. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired. "Miranda," he greeted, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for meeting me." I sat opposite him. "You said you wanted to talk about collaboration." He nodded slowly. "You've built something remarkable. Losing Borealis hit us hard, but I'll admit, it forced us to reevaluate how we treat our people. The partners. We mishandled things. You were right about the inefficiencies, about everything." Really, his admission landed heavier than I expected. "I tried to warn you," I said, keeping my tone even, not just once. He looked down at his coffee. "We were blind and arrogant." Then, glancing up, "We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition of Lumitrack. Or at least a licensing agreement." You name the terms, I almost smiled. "You fired me for having a second job, and now you want to buy it." He sighed. "We made a mistake." For a few seconds, I said nothing. The part of me that had endured years of being overlooked wanted to revel in this moment. To say something cutting, final. But another part, the one that had built Lumitrack from nothing, saw a bigger picture. "Robert, I said finally. I appreciate the offer. But I didn't build this to go back to what I left. We're doing things differently here, valuing people, not just profit. His eyes softened. You're not even going to consider it? I shook my head. You don't need my company. You need change. Start by listening to the people you still have. He exhaled slowly. Then at least allow me to apologize properly for how you were treated. I nodded once. Apology accepted. When I stood to leave, he rose too, extending his hand. Good luck, Miranda. You too, I said. You'll need it. Outside, the late afternoon light washed the city in gold. I walked the few blocks back to our office, my steps steady, unhurried. Inside, Daniel was on a call with a new potential client. He gave me a questioning look, and I mouthed, all good. When he hung up, he grinned. So? They wanted to buy us. He whistled. And you said? No. His grin widened. That's our Miranda. I laughed softly, the tension finally lifting. They'll be fine, I said. Or they won't. Either way, it's not my responsibility anymore. That evening, we gathered the small team we'd recently hired. 5 developers, 1 client manager, 1 data analyst. We ordered takeout and raised paper cups of sparkling water in our cramped little office. To the beginning, Daniel toasted. To second chances, I added. As everyone cheered, I looked around the room. The energy, the laughter, the shared excitement. It felt nothing like the sterile boardrooms I used to sit in. This was real. Later, after everyone left, I stayed behind, gazing out the window at the city skyline. My reflection stared back, tired but alive. I thought about the question HR had asked that morning they fired me. Why risk everything for a second job? The answer was simple now. Because that second job had never been a risk. Staying where I was, that had been the real gamble. I picked up my phone and drafted a short post for LumaTrack's company page. 2 days can change everything. Believe in your work even when others don't. Build quietly. Let results speak louder than explanations. I hit post, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment in the dark. Freedom didn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it came in the form of a termination letter and a second job no one understood. I smiled, remembering my words in that HR room. Good, I'd said. Then I can finally focus on one. Now, as I locked the office door behind me, I finally knew what that meant. One company, one purpose, one life I built myself. The laughter hit me harder than his words. 80 faces turned toward me, some smirking, others pretending to check their phones. As the new director, Alex Grant, stood in front of the screen with my name highlighted in red. You've done some nice work, Lily, he said, smiling like a surgeon about to make the first cut. But you've become a bottleneck. The conference room was too bright, the air too still. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. A bottleneck. I'd given 17 years to this company, long before Alex had even graduated college. I built the logistics systems that made us profitable, trained half the department, and managed crises that would have bankrupted us if I hadn't stayed until 3 a.m. to fix them. But in that instant, it was as if none of it mattered. The projector flicked to the next slide. Restructuring for efficiency. My position was listed under obsolete roles. Someone snorted quietly. Another chuckled. The sound spread like a crack through glass. Alex clasped his hands together, his designer watch glinting under the fluorescent light. We need to be agile, he continued, pacing as if lecturing a classroom. Legacy systems and outdated processes have been holding us back. We're moving forward with automation and younger, tech-driven staff, younger. The word stung more than obsolete. I kept my eyes on the table, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, the pulse in my ears. I'd spent almost 2 decades here, and now I was being erased in 15 minutes of corporate theater. He clicked to another slide. My team's new structure without me. Effective immediately, he said. Lily's department will transition under Tyler Chen. He'll lead the implementation of our new platform. Tyler, my former intern, sat up straighter, trying not to look proud. The same kid I'd mentored, the one who'd once asked me to review his graduate school application, now nodded like a puppet, pretending he deserved it. I gripped the edge of my chair until my knuckles whitened. Every instinct screamed to stand up, to defend myself, to say something. But all I could do was sit there, frozen, the humiliation washing over me in waves. Then, from the back of the room, a voice cut through the silence. "Do you even know who she is?" The laughter stopped instantly. Every head turned. An older man stepped forward, leaning heavily on a cane. His presence seemed to drain the oxygen from the room. It took me a heartbeat to recognize him. Edward Kane, the company's founder. He rarely appeared at these meetings anymore. I hadn't seen him in person for years. Alex blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Kane, Quiet." The word wasn't loud, but it carried decades of authority. He took a few slow steps forward, his eyes locked on Alex. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" The room fell completely silent. I could hear the hum of the projector, the faint creak of someone shifting in their chair. "This woman," Mr. Kane said, pointing his cane at me, "built the foundation you're now standing on. When our systems crashed back in 2008, she rebuilt them from scratch while half the company panicked. When we nearly lost the Jupiter contract, she stayed for 72 hours straight to save it." My throat tightened. I remembered those nights. No sleep, empty coffee cups, the faint hum of servers. But I'd never expected anyone to remember. And yet, here he was, listing the years I thought had vanished into oblivion. He turned to Alex. "You call her a bottleneck? You should be thanking her every day you have a job here." Alex's jaw clenched, but he kept his tone smooth. "With respect, sir, I value her contributions, but business evolves. We can't live in the past. Business evolves because of people like her." Mr. Kane interrupted sharply, not by replacing them, but by learning from them. For the first time in my life, I saw the director of operations, the man who'd humiliated me moments ago, struggle for words. His confidence faltered. His posture stiffened. Around the room, no one dared to move. Mr. Kane turned to me. His expression softened. "You've given this company your hands, your time, your health." I remember I nodded slightly. My voice caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. "Thank you, sir," I managed. He looked back at Alex. "You'll schedule a private meeting with me this afternoon. I want every detail of this restructuring plan. And if I find even one unjust dismissal, we'll be restructuring you instead." Alex opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked pale now, his earlier smirk gone. Mr. Kane tapped his cane once against the floor. "Meeting adjourned." He turned and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. One by one, people began gathering their things, whispering under their breath. Tyler avoided my eyes. Alex stared down at his laptop, pretending to type. I sat there for a moment longer, my pulse finally slowing. For 17 years, I'd been the one holding everything together quietly, invisibly. And in a single moment, the man who built this company had reminded everyone of it. But as I walked back to my office, I couldn't shake one thought. This wasn't over. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in all those years, it was this. Public humiliation is never just an accident. It's a move. And every move deserves a response. When I got back to my office, the open plan floor fell silent. Conversations cut off mid-sentence, keyboards stopped clicking, and everyone suddenly found something fascinating on their screens. No one looked at me directly, but I could feel their glances like static in the air. I closed the door quietly. The sound of it shutting felt final, like sealing myself off from the company I'd helped build. My desk looked exactly as it had for years. Neat stacks of reports, color-coded binders, a photo of my daughter on her first day of college. Nothing had changed on the surface, but everything had. For a long moment, I just stood there, trying to process what had happened. The humiliation still burned under my skin. Mr. Kane's defense had stunned everyone, including me, but it didn't erase the damage. Alex had called me obsolete in front of the entire company. That stain wouldn't wash off easily. A soft knock broke the silence. The door creaked open and Tyler stepped in. "Lily," he said carefully, "can we talk?" I studied him. He looked nervous, which was something. "You're the new head of operations," I said, keeping my voice even. "You don't need my permission to talk." He winced. "I didn't know Alex was going to do it like that," he said quickly. "He told me the restructuring would be private. I swear I didn't—" "Tyler," I interrupted. "Don't." "You sat there and said nothing." He shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't risk—" "I know," I said quietly. "You couldn't risk your position." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched until he muttered, "I'm sorry," and left. When the door shut again, I sat down and pressed my palms against the desk. I wasn't angry at Tyler. He was young, ambitious, and terrified. I'd been him once, but that didn't make the betrayal easier. A notification pinged on my computer. Mandatory HR meeting, 3 p.m. My stomach tightened. Damage control, I thought. They'd be scrambling to contain the fallout from Kane's outburst. At 3 sharp, I walked into HR's glass-walled office. Emma, the HR manager, gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lily, please sit down." Alex was already there, arms folded. He looked composed again, though a faint tension rippled around his mouth. "Let's keep this professional," he said. Professional? I almost laughed. Emma cleared her throat. "Mr. Kane's comments this morning created some confusion," she began. "We're reviewing all restructuring decisions to ensure compliance with policy. In the meantime, Lily, your role remains under evaluation." "Under evaluation?" I repeated. "Meaning?" Alex leaned forward. "Meaning nothing is finalized yet. We'll determine the best fit for your experience moving forward. You've been with the company a long time." We value that his tone was smooth, but his eyes gave him away. He wasn't apologizing. He was regrouping. "I see," I said. "And how long will this evaluation take?" "A week, maybe 2, Emma said. "Please don't worry." "You'll continue receiving full pay." I nodded slowly. "Right," paid silence. Neither of them responded. When I left the HR office, the hallway felt colder than usual. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. That was brave today. He won't forget it. No name, no signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time before locking the screen. I didn't need more mystery today. That evening, I stayed late, packing a few personal things into a box. Not because I was leaving, yet, but because it felt wrong to leave them in someone else's hands. I ran my fingers over a small wooden plaque on my shelf. Employee of the Year, 2013. The memory of that night came back easily. Mr. Kane shaking my hand, saying, "People like you are the reason we'll survive any storm." Apparently, storms were easier to survive when you weren't considered a bottleneck. As I turned off the lights, I noticed movement down the hall. Alex was in his glass office, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. His reflection shimmered faintly in the dark. I couldn't hear his words, but I caught fragments. Kane's interference, optics, temporary hold. So that was it. He wasn't backing down, just biding time until he could make his next move. On the drive home, the city lights blurred in the rain. My head throbbed. Every scene replayed in my mind. The laughter, the stares, Mr. Kane's voice slicing through the tension. "Do you even know who she is?" I didn't know what surprised me more. That he remembered me? Or that no one else seemed to? When I reached my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. My inbox was overflowing with quiet messages from colleagues. That was brutal. Are you okay? He had no right to humiliate you. Kane really put him in his place. And one that stood out. Be careful. He's already planning something. HR's just a smokescreen. No name again. I stared at the message for a long time. My instincts told me it was true. People like Alex didn't forget public embarrassment. They retaliated. Quietly. Efficiently. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen reflecting off my wine glass. I didn't know what Mr. Kane's sudden defense meant for me, whether it was protection or temporary luck. But I knew this. The fight wasn't over. And if Alex thought I was just an aging obstacle he could quietly push aside, he'd soon learn something about women like me. We may bend, but we don't break. Not when everything we've built is on the line. As thunder rolled faintly outside, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for HR to decide my worth. I was going to find out why Alex wanted me gone, and what he didn't want Mr. Kane to see. Because if he thought this was the end of my story, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The parking lot was still half empty, the building washed in the pale light of dawn. My badge still worked. Small mercy. And as the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirror-polished steel. Tired eyes, hair pulled back, calm on the surface. No one would guess my stomach was in knots. I needed answers. Alex hadn't humiliated me for sport. There was something else behind his decision, something strategic. People like him didn't move without purpose. When I reached my floor, I slipped into my office quietly. My inbox had already begun filling with overnight updates, mostly forwarded reports I wasn't supposed to see anymore. But one email caught my eye. Subject line: System audit. Procurement access request. Sent from Tyler's new account. I opened it. Attached was a request form bearing Alex's signature, asking for temporary elevated access to vendor contracts. That level of access was unnecessary for his position. It allowed someone to edit or replace supplier invoices, something only I and the finance controller were authorized to do. My gut twisted. I'd seen this pattern before, years ago, when a project manager had inflated vendor invoices to skim a consulting fee. We caught it just in time. Alex's request looked eerily similar. I printed the form and slipped it into my bag. If I was right, Alex wasn't streamlining operations. He was positioning himself to control money flows. And removing me, the only person who'd noticed discrepancies, was step one. A soft knock startled me. Emma from HR peeked in, holding a folder. Morning, Lily. Just checking in. How are you holding up? I've been better, I said honestly. What's that? Paperwork from yesterday's meeting, she said, placing it on my desk. Standard documentation while your role is under review. I thanked her, but before she left, I asked, Emma, do you know if Mr. Kane spoke to Alex after the meeting? She hesitated. They met privately last night. I wasn't there, but Alex didn't look pleased afterward. That gave me a flicker of hope. And the evaluation? Is HR actually reviewing, or is this just protocol? Her lips pressed together. Off the record? It's both. The board's split. Kane wants to freeze all structural changes until an internal audit is done. But Alex is pushing back, saying delays will cost the company an internal audit. I repeated. When does that start? End of the week, she said. They're bringing in an external team. My pulse quickened. If Alex had tampered with vendor contracts, that audit could expose it, unless he covered his tracks first. After she left, I stared at the folder on my desk. I couldn't sit and wait for someone else to uncover the truth. I opened my old system dashboard. Still active, thanks to a small oversight in IT's offboarding procedure, and began searching transaction logs from the past 2 months. It didn't take long. I found a series of unusual payments funneled through a new vendor account called ALX Consulting. The initials didn't even try to be subtle. The amounts were just below the threshold that triggered secondary approval. Classic trick. I took screenshots, encrypted them, and saved them to a flash drive I kept on my keychain. My hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was corporate fraud. At 9:05 a.m., the office began filling. Conversations floated through the air. Tyler walked by, pretending not to see me. Then, as I was about to close my laptop, an unexpected voice came from the doorway. "Early start, Ms. Hanley?" Alex stood there, coffee in hand, smile perfectly measured. Still dedicated, even while on review. Impressive, I forced a calm tone. Old habits. He stepped inside, uninvited, and leaned casually against the desk. "Listen, about yesterday. Things got a little intense. I hope you understand this is nothing personal." "Of course," I said evenly. "Purely business." He studied me, his eyes sharp, calculating. "You've done good work here, but sometimes progress means letting go. The founder? He's sentimental. I'm not. Don't take it the wrong way." "I don't," I lied. "I just hope the company benefits from the changes." "Oh, it will," he said with quiet confidence. "Trust me." He turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, HR mentioned you still have access to the old logistics system. IT will disable it today. Just a heads up." My chest tightened. He knew. "Of course," I said, managing a polite smile. When he left, I exhaled slowly. I had maybe a few hours before he locked me out. I backed up the rest of the transaction logs and hid the flash drive inside the lining of my bag. At lunch, I drove to a small cafe across from headquarters, the same place Mr. Kane used to eat when he still ran the company. I wasn't sure why, but I hoped I might find him there. Luck, or fate, was on my side. He was sitting alone in the corner, reading the paper. I hesitated, then approached. "Mr. Kane?" He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before softening into recognition. "Lily," he said warmly. "Join me." I sat down, lowering my voice. "Sir, I think I know why Alex wanted me gone." He listened as I explained everything. The access requests, the vendor account, the hidden payments. His expression hardened with every word. "I can't prove intent yet," I said, sliding a copy of the form across the table. "But this isn't routine." He's consolidating financial control. Kane's jaw tightened. That would explain the resistance to the audit. He folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket. "You did the right thing telling me. But you need to be careful. Don't confront him again. Let me handle this quietly. I can't just—" "You've done enough," he interrupted firmly. "I'll make some calls. Go home early today. And Lily, thank you." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. "He knows you talked to Kane." My blood ran cold. When I looked back toward the office building, Alex was standing by the window of his corner office, phone pressed to his ear, eyes locked on the parking lot. Straight at me. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my apartment made me flinch. The glow from my phone on the nightstand kept me half awake, waiting for another message that never came. By sunrise, I had convinced myself I was overreacting, but a part of me knew I wasn't. Alex knew I'd gone to Kane. That much was certain. The question was, how? When I arrived at work the next morning, the air felt heavier. My badge still worked, but I noticed 2 security officers standing near the elevators, pretending not to watch me. In the office, people avoided eye contact altogether. Even Tyler's desk was empty. As I sat down, my computer booted to a new login screen. My access had been fully revoked. A message appeared. "Account deactivated. Please contact IT." They'd moved faster than I expected. At 9:12 a.m., Emma from HR appeared at my door. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "Lily," she began, "could we speak privately?" I nodded, following her into a small meeting room. She closed the door softly. I wanted you to hear this from me, she said, lowering her voice. Alex reported that you accessed confidential financial files after your role was suspended. My stomach dropped. That's not true. I accessed data I was still authorized to view. I believe you, she said quickly. But the board's being told you leaked sensitive information to external parties, possibly to Mr. Kane. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. That's absurd. I know, she said, but he's building a case. He's saying your actions could compromise pending contracts. I took a steadying breath. And what does the board believe? She hesitated. They're divided. Kane's pushing for a formal audit, but Preston, our CEO, is backing Alex for now. HR has been instructed to suspend your employment until the investigation is complete. Suspended. It felt like the word itself sucked all the air out of the room. Emma looked genuinely sorry. I shouldn't even be telling you this. But be prepared. You'll probably receive an official notice by the end of the day. I stared at the blank whiteboard on the wall, the faint traces of old marker lines that no one had bothered to erase. So that's it. 17 years, and suddenly I'm under investigation. Emma touched my arm gently. For what it's worth, Kane doesn't believe any of it. He's furious. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Kane's support was powerful, but temporary. If Alex managed to fabricate evidence before the audit began, I'd be the scapegoat. When I returned to my office, a cardboard box sat on my desk with a note from security. Please clear personal items before noon. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just a box. It was the physical manifestation of erasure. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email from a private address. Check the contracts folder in Internal Archive. Folder name, Phoenix. No signature, no context. Just that. Against every sensible instinct, I decided to follow the lead. Using my personal laptop, I accessed the company's public archive system, a server used for marketing materials that still mirrored older internal data. It took minutes of digging, but I found it. Phoenix_contracts_2023. The files were encrypted PDFs with altered metadata, recently modified by T. Chen. My heart sank. Tyler. I opened one file using a decryption tool I'd helped IT test years ago. Inside were purchase orders and payments tied to the same fake vendor name, ALX Consulting. But now it was worse. Tyler's digital signature had been appended to them, effectively making him look like the culprit. It was a perfect setup. Alex had left just enough digital fingerprints to implicate someone else. And now that I'd been suspended, I'd have no way to clear my name once this evidence surfaced. I copied everything, screenshots, logs, metadata trails, and sent them to an encrypted email address I'd created the night before. Then I printed one contract, folded it carefully, and slid it into my bag. At 11:32 a.m., my office phone rang. Unknown number. Lily Hanley, I answered. Ms. Hanley, a man's voice said briskly, "This is Marcus Lane, external auditor assigned by the board. Mr. Kane requested that we meet today. Are you available at 2 o'clock? Relief flickered through me. Yes, absolutely. Please bring any documentation relevant to your role's restructuring and project finances from the last quarter," he added. I glanced at the flash drive in my bag. I will. 2 hours later, I sat in the conference room across from Marcus, a calm, methodical man in his 40s with sharp eyes and no visible bias. Kane joined us 10 minutes later, walking with his cane but radiating authority. "Before we begin," Marcus said, "Mr. Kane has shared concerns regarding irregularities in financial records. Ms. Hanley, I understand you have supporting material?" I nodded and handed him a folder of printouts, explaining the pattern, the fake vendor, the access requests. As I spoke, Kane's expression darkened. When I finished, Marcus looked thoughtful. These documents show unauthorized approvals, but they'll need to be verified against the original database. Your access has been revoked, correct? Yes, I said. I'll request mirrored backups, he said. If this holds up, it's serious misconduct, possibly criminal. Kane turned to me. You did the right thing. Stay away from the office for now. I'll ensure you're protected. Before I could reply, the door opened. Alex stepped in uninvited, mask of politeness firmly in place. I wasn't aware we had a meeting, he said, glancing between us. Marcus stood. Mr. Grant, we're conducting a preliminary review of financial discrepancies. Alex's eyes flicked to the papers on the table. And you're relying on her? The person under investigation for leaking internal data? Kane's cane struck the floor sharply. Watch your words, Alex. Alex's smile didn't falter. Just stating facts. You're letting emotion cloud judgment. I met his gaze. You're scared, I said quietly. He froze for half a second, just enough to confirm it. Marcus gathered the papers. I'll need to review the system backups. We'll resume tomorrow. As I stood to leave, Alex leaned in close enough for only me to hear. You think you've won something? You have no idea how deep this goes. I didn't answer. But as I walked out of the building, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not fear. Control. By the next morning, the office was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Rumors moved faster than emails. I parked farther away than usual and watched from my car for a moment. The kind of quiet before a storm that feels almost sacred. I wasn't supposed to come in. Kane had told me to stay home. But I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know it was finally ending. When I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist gave me a nervous smile. Morning, Ms. Hanley. They're expecting you upstairs. Who's they? She hesitated. Mr. Kane, the auditors, and the board. My pulse quickened. It was happening. I took the elevator to the top floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see everyone already seated. Kane at the head of the table, Marcus beside him with a thick folder. Preston, the CEO, looked tense. Alex sat near the corner, his usual composure replaced by something brittle and sharp. When I entered, every conversation stopped. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Hanley, Marcus said, gesturing to the empty chair opposite Alex. We'll be brief. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. Marcus opened his folder. After reviewing the backup servers and transaction histories, we've confirmed multiple unauthorized modifications to vendor contracts over the past 3 months. Payments totaling just under $400,000 were funneled through a shell entity called ALX Consulting. A murmur rippled around the table. Marcus continued, voice calm but cold. The account was traced to an offshore company registered under an alias matching your initials, Mr. Grant. We also found that several of the altered files were timestamped during hours when Ms. Hanley's credentials were inactive, meaning she could not have accessed them. All eyes turned to Alex. He forced a laugh that didn't sound human. That's ridiculous. Anyone could have spoofed my credentials, especially someone who knew the systems inside out. He looked at me. Like her? Marcus didn't flinch. We verified through IOP logs and system certificates. The activity originated from your office computer, Mr. Grant. The evidence is definitive. Alex's smile cracked. This is absurd. Kane's voice cut through the air. Enough. The single word landed like a gavel. You've been warned before about overreaching. Now we find you've been stealing from the very company you claim to modernize. Preston rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. Alex? Why? Alex straightened in his chair, defiance flickering. Because this place is dying, he said, voice rising. You all worship tradition while competitors leave us behind. I was trying to save it, and he pointed at me, was standing in the way. You weren't saving it, Kane said quietly. You were selling it. The room went still. Marcus closed the folder. We've already frozen the accounts linked to your authorization keys. Legal counsel is preparing formal charges. You'll need to surrender your access badge immediately. For a moment, Alex just sat there, stunned. Then his jaw tightened. You'll regret this, he spat, rising abruptly. All of you. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The echo lingered long after his footsteps faded. Preston sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging. 17 years, he said, turning to me. You warned us about the human cost of rushing modernization. I should have listened sooner. Kane placed a hand on the table. We'll correct it now. He looked at me. Lily, I owe you an apology. You didn't just protect this company. You protected its soul. I swallowed hard, the weight of months finally catching up to me. I didn't do it for gratitude, I said quietly. I just didn't want to see everything we built destroyed. Preston nodded. The board has already agreed to reinstate your position. And not just that. We want you to lead the new Quality and Ethics Division. Direct access to the board. No intermediaries. For a second, I couldn't speak. You're serious? Kane smiled faintly. Completely. Relief flooded me so quickly it almost made me dizzy. 17 years of work, humiliation, and fear, validated in a single moment. I thanked them both and stepped outside. Through the window, I could see security escorting Alex out of the building, his shoulders rigid, his gaze fixed straight ahead. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt strangely hollow. When I returned to my old office, a few coworkers looked up. No one laughed this time. Tyler approached me hesitantly. Lily, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know what he was doing. I know, I said. Now you do. Learn from it. He nodded, eyes lowered. That evening, after the official announcement went out, I stayed behind, standing by the window as the city lights blinked to life. My reflection stared back. Older, steadier, maybe a little wiser. Kane stopped by before leaving. You could have walked away, he said. Most people would have. I almost did, I admitted. But sometimes walking away feels like letting someone else write the ending for you. He nodded thoughtfully. Then I'm glad you stayed long enough to finish the story yourself. When he left, I turned off the lights. The office was quiet again. Just the soft hum of the machines I once feared would replace me. They hadn't. They never could. The next morning, I arrived early, coffee in hand, same as always. My nameplate had been reinstalled outside my office door. Clean, polished, like it had never been removed. But inside, I left one thing unchanged. The small wooden plaque on my shelf. Employee of the Year, 2013. I smiled. Not because of what it represented, but because of what it reminded me. Progress doesn't mean erasing the past. It means building on it. And sometimes the quietest person in the room, the one you call a bottleneck, is the only reason everything still works.